Okay, welcome to the stream. Welcome to the big ticket stream. It's been a long time. It's good to be back. So yeah, we have a lot to discuss tonight. I'm just checking my audio real quick, making sure everything is coming in clear, and then we will get going. Yeah, I do have sound on, alright. Alright, I gotta make this louder. No, I can't make it louder. Move it over. Okay, so if you guys are having trouble hearing me, just let me know and I will adjust the audio, but I think it should be okay. So let's get this up and we will get into it. So it's been a pretty busy news day. You know, some stuff has been going down in the world of the Middle East. And I've seen a lot of people discussing all kinds of stuff. What's going on with Trump, what's going on with Iran, what's going on just in general. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go live and talk about it because I am sick of having to constantly tweet things out that no one sees. So first off, there's been a lot of talk about, let's check one more thing. No, my audio is good. So first off, the ceasefire itself. What is the ceasefire doing and what is it saying? Because a lot of people have been declaring, oh, Iran's won. This is a big win for Iran. So let's look at Trump's official statement. Trump-Iran statement. I should have gotten this up to begin with. And also Lebanon. I want to talk about Lebanon too, because that's kind of, it's important, but it's also not necessarily being acknowledged as much as it should be. So Trump has said, that's the old one. Where's the official statement? Where is it? I should really have these things open ahead of time, but I never do. You know, just go to White House account. White House. There we go. Okay. So Trump's original statement basically said, conditional on the Strait of Hormuz being open, there would be a 2-week ceasefire and we'll go from there. Now, with Trump, I think something very important to remember is that when he sets a deadline, like, for example, the 8 p.m. one, that doesn't mean all of a sudden that he's just not going to, he's not going to act just because there's a delay. The original deadline still holds. There was an original deadline for the Iranian nuclear deal back in the summer that when that deadline expired, regardless of what happened, he was still willing to negotiate. You have to remember, Trump's, I think it was on a Wednesday that Trump's deadline passed back in June, and yet there were still negotiations set to occur that Saturday. In theory, if Iran didn't cancel it when Israel attacked, there could have still been a deal to be made. But once Trump sets a deadline, what he's really doing is he's saying, I now reserve the right to act, regardless of what happens next. And so I think the 8 p.m. represents that. And so I think a lot of people are thinking, oh, it's over. Trump is moving a lot of assets right now into the Middle East. And I think that is something that people aren't necessarily looking at. Again, if Trump wanted to posture, right? Like, let's say he really wants this to be over, he wouldn't move more stuff. He would just keep everything there, and that would make the point he's trying to make. But he's not doing that. Instead, what he's doing is he's moving more stuff. He moved Marines today. He's moving more assets. You don't do that because you're posturing. You're doing that because you're prepared to move to the next stage. Now, what that next stage is, I don't know. I don't know what Trump necessarily is intending to do next, but I do know that whatever it is, it'll be something much bigger. Because again, that's what Trump was threatening. If you don't comply, if you don't make a deal, you know, it's going to be, for lack of better phrasing, not a very good time for Iran. The Islamic regime will be attacked and possibly collapsed. And let me pull up the statement because I'm on Truth Social now. Where is it? A big day for world peace. Iran wants it to happen. No one believes fake news. Official statement based on... Here we go. Let me put this on screen now. That took way too long to find. Okay. So he officially said, based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir, I hope I'm saying their names right, of Pakistan, and wherein they requested I hold off on the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran and subject the Islamic Republic of Iran, agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agreed, you know, that being met, I agreed to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. Now, ignoring this 10-point thing, because I think people are blowing that out of proportion, Iran has since said they're closing the Strait of Hormuz. No, I don't know what this is. Oh, yeah, the news on the 50,000. Iran announced that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. They are not opening it. They were told to turn back around per Reuters. So I don't think necessarily those terms were met. Iran has since begun firing off missiles again, which Trump said, there's always going to be a little bit of firing on both sides until everything gets straightened out, which again is fair. But you got to make sure everyone's aware that, hey, we're done. Don't fire that last rocket as it's already been launched. So that's always going to happen, except again, Iran's continued since. They have shut down the Strait of Hormuz. And they've said as much. Let me pull up this statement on that. Strait of Hormuz. Look at my amazing spelling, guys. The Strait of Hormuz. The Strait. Thank you. So Iran is halting traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, which means in turn that Trump's 2-week ceasefire, which is contingent on that being open, is now dead. That doesn't mean Trump's going to start bombing them, but he did say very clearly, subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening. It's not completely open, it's not immediately open, and it's not safely opened. They're doing the opposite. They're telling people to turn around. And it will be a double-sided ceasefire. It has not been. The UAE actually, for the first time, has actually begun taking action, which I think isn't that surprising. I think the idea was Trump's going to back down, Israel's going to be back down, and the Arabs are now going to get their little pot shots in, because now, they got to restore their honor or whatever, after being attacked for multiple weeks and not doing anything. And, like this tweet here actually is a great example. The Strait of Hormuz is in a quantum superposition of open and close that only collapses when you try to take a tanker through yourself and see if you get shot out. But that is not the complete, immediate, and safe opening. So that quantum position that I think Iran wants to use to kind of like play the game is not going to be good enough for Trump. The other thing they've done is they've tried this morning, Lebanon was prepared, not Lebanon, Hezbollah was in Beirut, was prepared to launch a massive coup. They had hundreds of stations set up. They were going to raid buildings. This has been confirmed now by Lebanese government officials. Hezbollah was going to try to do a coup against the president of Lebanon. And what ended up happening was Israel, finding out about this, bombed all the little stations that were set up, like all the military positions where they were going to raid from. And it was over 100 bombings in 10 minutes, which you can see on this map here. Every brown circle is a bombing. And if, I don't know, you can see even more down here. And, Iran claimed, and I've seen no evidence of this personally, that the ceasefire applied to Lebanon, which immediately after the ceasefire was declared, and Israel said, no, this only applies to Iran. It does not apply to the proxies, especially those in Lebanon. Quote unquote, according to Hezbollah and Iran, all the blue was supposed to be evacuated, and Israel was supposed to stop fighting in southern Lebanon, which was never going to happen. They're marching towards Tyre right now. They're not going to suddenly just stop. And it doesn't even make sense from a practical standpoint. So what this really represents is it's a major, major challenge to the Iranian proxy network. If we zoom out once again and go back to the Iran screen, there have been bombings in Iraq, where the Popular Mobilization Front and other Iranian paramilitaries and militant groups have been trying to attack U.S. bases, or they've been there as foreign mercenaries. Some of them have begun entering into Iran, actually, to back up the IRGC, who's in currently pretty bad shape. So I think they generally are in the southern part of Iraq, if I remember correctly, and they've been entering into Iran, but also they've been the subject of heavy, heavy bombings. So they're if Iran is unable to credibly feed their proxies, like in Lebanon, which is a big test case, if they cannot keep the Hezbollah and back Hezbollah up, either through deterrence by threatening to bomb Israel, or just via this deterrence through the ceasefire and force Israel to capitulate, that the ceasefire says they can't bomb Lebanon, which the U.S. disagrees with. The U.S. says, no, actually, it does not apply to Hezbollah. So either Hezbollah is on their own, which is going to hurt Iran's credibility with other groups now and in the future. That issue is actually why I think the Houthis have been very, very quiet this entire time. We've seen them fire a few missiles off, and that's been about it. I think they've calculated that Iran is gone. They're not coming back, at least as a major source of aid. And with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, you have to remember it was back in December you had the southern Yemen form and then disappear and within 5 minutes of each other, and that was backed by the UAE and Israel, and that's part of their Mediterranean strategy or their coastal strategy, where you have where you have Sudan, you have Somaliland, you have possibly southern Yemen. You have Cyprus and Greece as part of this, where they're both allies of Israel. You have quite possibly southern Lebanon if that's where things are going, and it looks like they may be going there. There was some group that called itself like I think it's like a Christian separatist group, and they've been saying they're going to break off from they want to break off and have independence from the Lebanese government, calling it a failed state. And I'll pull up that statement in a minute. I don't know how credible this new group is. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but I think it's telling that groups are beginning to claim this. And I think that's kind of what Israel and the UAE have been going for. They've certain states they've written off as failed, and if they can carve out like almost like protectorates or allies out of the parts that are strategically useful and ideologically aligned with Israel and the UAE, then there's a huge potential there that rather than work with specifically all of Yemen, why bother when you can just make a southern Yemen? And the Houthis in the last round they didn't really have any fighting going on. Saudi Arabia and the UAE fought a little proxy battle that ultimately the UAE pulled out of. But when Iran's gone, the legitimate government of Yemen's and Saudi Arabia, who's their main backer, they're going to want to go push against the Houthis and force them out. At which point the UAE may try to come in and take southern Yemen at the same time. Or you might see them work together to push the Houthis out and then figure out how to divide up Yemen if they're going to divide it up at all. But none of that can happen as long as Iran is funding them. And if Yemen burns through its stockpile now, it's going to make it all the easier and more tempting for Saudi Arabia or Israel or the UAE to renew attacks on Yemen. So we will see what happens there, or against the Houthis rather. So we will see what happens there. But right now the main thing is Lebanon. I think Hezbollah is in a lot of trouble in the north. They've become more and more unpopular, and they're getting further cut off from Iran. Iran will either have to now violate the ceasefire, and bring down the end of civilization, as Trump called it, and possibly see a revolution now, or they have to abandon Hezbollah at its time of need and further hurt their credibility with the other groups, even if they do survive even if the regime survives, their credibility with the Iraqi groups, with Hezbollah, with the Houthis and everyone else, it's fractured. If you're Hezbollah going forward, or the Iraqi Hezbollah, or the Popular Mobilization Front, or the Houthis, your job was to basically be so overwhelming against Israel and the West and Western aligned states that even if there's no nuke, they could still inflict so much damage there's deterrence. But that's all based on their loyalty and interest with Iran. In exchange, Iran funds and supplies them and backs them up. And therefore, it creates deterrence against any attack on these little groups, because an attack on one's an attack on all. When Israel invaded Gaza after October 7th, Hezbollah and the Houthis and groups in Iraq, which people don't really remember, but the Popular Mobilization Front and other Iraqi groups, one called the Islamic Resistance, all began shooting rockets at Israel. So again, it was not a NATO-style literal invasion attack, attack on one's attack on all. But in principle, even if it was purely symbolic, they did all act. They miscalculated in that they didn't think Israel had the resolve to do things like bomb Iraqi groups, invade Lebanon, and wipe out the Houthi cabinet. But that's besides the point. Ultimately, that led to Iran. Had they all attacked at once, that maybe you'd have that deterrence. But they failed to act as a cohesive force, each doing their own thing to contribute to the greater cause, and they all suffered as a result. So now when Iran, if they abandon Hezbollah this time, when they go to the Houthis and say, we need you to start firing on Israel or the UAE or Saudi Arabia, we need help here, we need more pressure, and we can't do it ourselves. The Houthis might say, well, what happens when I get attacked by Saudi Arabia? Are you going to abandon me because you have some ceasefire? But if Iran breaks the ceasefire, they're kind of screwed. So there's a huge credibility problem within the axis right now, and I would expect that to continue. If anyone in the chat wants to ask questions, please feel free. I don't know if they're going to, but, I'm happy to answer questions. So that's what's going on there. I'm very curious to see how Trump reacts to the current situation with the Straits. I think Iran does not want to act on behalf of Hezbollah, but I think they're stuck. And as long as they're stuck, it undermines them in either direction. And that was the other point I wanted to bring up. You have to remember that the original deal that Trump wanted was that were three major red lines. One, no nuclear weapon. Two, or enrichment or anything like that. Two, no ballistic missiles or drones or whatever, like no major threatening weapon program, and mainly the ballistic missiles. And three, end of the proxy network, with a lot of other things being secondary to that. So when Iran said no, what Trump did is he blew up their nuclear facilities and their capacity. He destroyed the ballistic missile manufacturing. Even steel and aluminum plants have been bombed. And now the proxy networks are being completely undermined and destroyed. But Trump's three main goals, we don't know for sure what the main objective is. It could still be like a complete regime change. We don't know. But Trump's three major red lines, he has shown, could be achieved through a mix of military and political force. And had Iran capitulated, that could have all been avoided, but unfortunately here we are and we're in the midst of a war. But Trump has achieved the main objectives of what the deal was he was seeking to do. So Iran is now kind of in a bad situation because regardless of what they do or don't do, they have to abandon their proxy network or restart the war and have their proxy network get destroyed. So the question is, are they going to write Hezbollah off? And what will the cost of writing Hezbollah off be in the future? Because Hezbollah and all these proxy groups are a long-term investment to hedge against possible war, and it's, against the West or Israel or create deterrence. But, if they act now, it comes at the cost of restarting the war, which they would only do if they believe they would survive in the long run. But if they abandon Hezbollah, then that would probably mean they're worried about their prospects. But at the same time, it could affect their prospects down the line if they do survive. Because if they do somehow survive, the next war, they're not going to have their proxy network, or they're not going to have their influence that they once held, because people aren't going to trust them. And I think that's something that people have been talking about, but I think it's something that goes under acknowledged in all the discussion. A lot of people are just getting angry that Israel is attacking Hezbollah, but not acknowledging just how damaging it is to the regime and its axis as a whole. Not because Hezbollah specifically is getting destroyed, but because the basis of the axis and how it was meant to function is being destroyed. And we now have reports that in Karaj, Iran, a massive blast was heard, and we don't know who it was from. So I don't know for sure who that was or what it was, but I have a feeling that whatever it was probably in some form a response to their violations of the ceasefire, to not opening the straits. Maybe it was a warning shot. I don't know. It could have been the UAE again. It could have been Saudi Arabia this time. We just don't know. But all throughout the day, there have been little reports once in a while about attacks. And I'm just seeing if there's any other breaking news. Yeah, so the U.S. Army will not withdraw any of its forces, and that's also, to me, very telling. It's not posturing to keep the size. The force that's there was beyond what you would use for posturing, and keeping it there is, again, beyond what you would use for posturing. I don't think the ceasefire is going to hold at current rates. It could. If Iran kind of like stops doing what it's doing and just and just agrees to open the Strait of Hormuz. But again, because of the situation with Hezbollah, they only have two options. They rejoin the war proper, or they close the Strait of Hormuz and force the restarting of the war and hope that they make America look bad in doing so and try to get everyone to blame Israel. I don't know if they can achieve that, and I don't know if they're willing to risk the cost of war over protecting Hezbollah and losing the proxies in turn. I think they're very, very stuck. And I think they're both kind of losing situations if you're Iran, because you either give up your proxies and your credibility with them as a greater force, or you rejoin the war and incur all the cost of that. Is the cost of war worth the proxies and your credibility with them? Do you abandon them and hope to survive as a regime and maybe get a Venezuela situation, or do you rejoin the war now and hope to not incur, incur too many costs and get a deal back on the table, but this time one that applies to the greater region and see what happens. I don't think they can get that. Again, everything Trump's done has reflected that original plan, that he didn't want nukes, he didn't want proxies, and he didn't want ballistic missiles. The nukes and the ballistic missiles are now off the table. They're gone. They've been destroyed. And they can, and Trump said himself, if we have to go in ourselves and get it, we will. Do a raid. We know where it is. We can see where they are. Pete Hegseth spoke about that this morning. He said we have satellites literally just sitting above it, and all they do is take pictures all day of it. And we'll get it if we need to. We'd rather get it ourselves and make a deal to get it, but if we have to, we have to. And the proxies, same thing. So Iran can either incur the cost of war protecting them, or incur the cost of abandoning and further losing deterrence. And I don't know what they'd prefer to do in these situations. If anyone in the chat wants to ask a question, please feel free. But I think it's a lose-lose, and I think they're stuck. And I don't know what the original deal said. There were some reports today that Pakistan actually gave them a mix, like basically made two ceasefire agreements. One went to the Iranians, and it included the proxies getting protection, and one went to the U.S., and that was the official one. And parts of Iran and the IRGC, or the entire of it, was duped, and now they're in a bad situation either way. I think the fact that they jumped to their so-called nuclear option and opening the straits and attacking the Arabs, even before the Israeli attacks, which, again, there might have been some just firing off based on outdated orders, but I think it's very telling that that Iran is closing the straits or refusing to open it, because, again, it creates that credibility problem with a deal, and it gives the U.S. a perfect chance to start up the bombings again. And as we saw with Hezbollah, I do believe Hezbollah was probably under the impression that there was a ceasefire. Even though Israel said there wasn't, I think they did, because they apparently used Zoom. They warned something not to have in-person meetings. Could have been an email, but then Israel hacked the the Zoom meeting, doxed them essentially, and then started bombing them. So maybe not the best day for Hezbollah. But and that might have been part of it. There might have been some amount of what's the term, deception there with the ceasefire. Maybe that was intentional. And I've also seen a lot of people use the 10-point plan that Iran put out, which included some pretty stupid things. I mean, they talked about they wanted something passed in the United Nations Security Council as part of the permanent ceasefire. But again, the United States on its own cannot do that. The U.S., even if it has a signed piece of paper, cannot stand in the UN and say, you have to do this. France, which I don't think France would, but France could just get up and say, no, we don't want to do that. We're not repealing the past UNSC resolutions. And then what? Does the war start because France interfered with the agreement? So I think that on its own is telling. A lot of the things in there were unrealistic. They want to try, with the Strait of Hormuz, they're basically saying they want to try to split the pot with Oman, who was more neutral in this whole thing, and basically bribe them for staying out of it with some of the money from the straits. I don't think there's a world where that happens. Oman said they don't want to do that, and creating a thing with the straits, and if the Arabs allowed the straits to be monetized like that, in the long run, it creates more problems for them, because if they all cooperate, everyone benefits from the free passage of oil and goods and other supplies. The moment one country's allowed to monetize it, you're eventually going to have wars over who gets to monetize it. So maybe Qatar versus Oman versus Saudi Arabia versus the UAE, all fighting to be the guy who gets to charge tolls, or they might all charge tolls, and then oil prices go up, and people don't want to buy oil from those countries, or they build pipelines to go around it, which there's already been discussion of. I don't think in the long run you want to have the tolls there. And that's why the Arab states are all very opposed to it, not just because it hurts them now, but because it creates instability in the future. Even if Iran collapses today, the Islamic regime collapses today, and they have zero power over the straits, and they're gone, and ships can pass freely, because someone else is going to want to start doing that, or the theoretical potential for someone else to start doing that is itself a problem. So that is something else I did want to talk about, and I'm not sure what else I did want to talk about. I've seen a lot going on today, and I kind of just wanted to get my thoughts out on figurative paper. Anything else I've seen that I wanted to talk about? I don't think people understand how Trump operates generally with deals. And that's something else I think is kind of under discussed. When Trump does a deal, right? Like, let's say, like, or makes a threat, people have been going, oh, it's Taco, he's chickening out. But again, what Trump does in his strategy of deals is he makes a threat, which is credible most of the time. See the last war we had. See Venezuela. See any of that, right? See, I don't know what's gonna happen with Cuba, but quite possibly see Cuba. Um, the blockade, which I guess that was he did follow through on that, so I guess you could chalk that up too. And even with NATO, to some extent, not as much, but he does try to do this with NATO, and now with the bases. I don't think that'll go anywhere. He's going to shift some bases around. We'll see what happens with that. But he makes a threat, and he generally most of the time means it. I truly believe that at 8 o'clock at night, if Iran didn't reply, with the agreement signed, he would have bombed them he would have bombed everything the IRGC and the Islamic regime considered worth anything. Bridges, roads, trains, all of which, by the way, were used during the repression of the Iranian people during their protest to slaughter them. 45,000 people died because of that infrastructure. Because the foreign mercenaries and the IRGC and the Basij forces were allowed to get around Iran and have free movement and then start killing people. And if you read the full statement at the time, and I'll pull it up, people saw the word civilization and went, oh no, he's gonna do a genocide. He's gonna kill all the people of Iran, 90 million people. But that's not what he actually said if you actually read it. And I think that's part of the problem is people don't understand how to speak Trump. First off, in the world of the Middle East, this is kind of like speaking Middle East politics. This is how they threaten each other and negotiate. Which I think, wow, Trump really tweeted a lot yesterday. Okay, let's get this up on the screen. Wrong tab. Okay, window capture 2. So, specifically said, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. That civilization, to me, is the Islamic regime, this new government that's been in place. I think he views the Islamist government there and the Islamist, I guess you could say, civilization to be a civilization. However, now that we have total and complete regime change, where different, smarter, and less radicalized mind prevails, maybe something revolutionarily wonderful can happen. Who knows? Again, if you truly are threatening to kill everyone in Iran or kill a very large amount of people in Iran, you don't then hint at a revolution, because the people who would revolt are the civilians you're probably going to end up killing with the nukes or the Moabs or whatever, literally like leveling all of Tehran, like Gaza City during the siege of Gaza City, which Israel did to fight against, in an urban warfare environment. Trump's not threatening to level and make Tehran look like Nagasaki. What he's saying is that we're going to completely collapse the infrastructure and of the IRGC, which is not what we did in Venezuela. We removed the president, and then we put in someone else, Delcy Rodriguez, and then that quote unquote civilization of Venezuela has continued on. People see civilization and fairly think he means literally the Iran, as in the society, but I don't think that's how he understood the word in this context. Because again, what he's really saying is that if we have to remove the Islamist regime, the whole thing, the whole apparatus, and even maybe the bureaucracy, who knows? I don't know how he exactly defines it. Then he will force a revolution. He will fully go all out so that a revolution occurs. And that same day, yesterday, the the Shah Reza Pahlavi put out a statement that almost backed up this idea. He basically said the same thing, and he said, the time is coming, ready yourselves, whatever. And ultimately the ceasefire was achieved, so we don't know what the exact details were there. But I do think that was all set up for a possible revolution, or to create the threatable threat of a revolution, so that the current government gives in, because otherwise they would face a true revolution and not just have to make major concessions. Because the new government, like Delcy Rodriguez, maybe these guys are saying, you know what, I'd rather be in power and have some sense of control over the country than be in a casket or be killed by revolutionaries. So in exchange for getting to be run the bureaucracy like Delcy Rodriguez and make concessions, we will not be overthrown in a violent revolution regime change. That is what I think Trump was hoping would happen, and I think that to some extent is. The credible threat of revolution, even not just even the bombings, but the bombings done in a way to allow revolution, which is what he was threatening, was enough of a credible threat that Iran wanted to come to the table. Now that they've gotten that deal, and maybe they think the revolution's been suppressed purely because of the news of a deal, they think they can start playing games again. And I think that's going to end very, very badly. And I think that's why the reports from the Wall Street Journal are saying that it would be a much larger and intense war. Because once again, at this point, Trump's main targets have been the weapons, the manufacturing of the weapons, and other military sites, not, and obviously against the actual Ayatollah, but it has not generally been with the intent to force the overthrow of the regime. The regime can recover from this if the war ends for good. They are in a position to recover, and whatever this new regime is that he refers to, which is whoever's running the show right now there from in the Islamic regime, he believes that they're credible enough of a group that he could try to work with them, or at least create. And I don't know how many I don't know who that is. I don't know how many of them. I don't know how many people in the regime agree with this, but at least these people want to live, for lack of better phrasing. They're not suicidal enough in theory that they want the path that Venezuela got. They don't want to be completely overthrown. It's not like, you know, they don't want the binary of all or nothing. They're willing to make concessions in theory to avoid a true revolution and to avoid the attacks that would cause a revolution. Even if the revolution fails, the damage and cost of having to suppress it and rebuild from that might be so great that, even the threat of having to suppress a revolution is enough, not even being overthrown. But and I think that's what Trump was doing. And I think that now that it's been shut down and now what's going on with Hezbollah, I think that Trump may fully go in with the intent to do that. He threatened to end the Islamic regime's grip over Iran and overthrow it truly. Not just remove one person, but overthrow it. And I think that's what he's probably intending to do if that report about high intensity is real, is true. And we will see what happens there. Just seeing if there's any other news. People are claiming Iran's won, but they're kind of like in a check situation where, they're one move away from being checkmated and they don't know which move is the move that will get them checkmated. I think they're stuck. And yeah, that's really my main point. I think they're stuck. I think they've been outplayed and they're stuck. And I think they're either going to have to fully open the Strait of Hormuz and commit and abandon Hezbollah, or the war is going to start at an even higher intensity. And whether they survive or not, they're going to pay huge cost either way, and they're going to lose credibility with the proxy network if they don't. And either way, it fully weakens the Shia axis of resistance, so-called axis of resistance, and it will allow for countries like Lebanon, maybe Yemen, maybe Iraq to begin to stabilize. Remember, Trump leading into the war, and this is something also kind of goes forgotten, was pushing to purge out the Shia groups in Iraq. I think he forced the prime minister to resign, or I believe it was the prime minister who was in line or was in bed with the Shia groups as well as Iran. So I think Trump is trying to disconnect all these militant groups from Iran, either by destroying them fully, but through by getting rid of Iran and taking it off the chessboard, or by forcing them to abandon those pieces and getting to stay on the chessboard as each pawn gets taken. To use that metaphor, I guess you could say. But yeah, I think that's where we are right now. I think that's pretty much everything that there is to cover from today's news, and the strategies of what Trump is doing, what Israel's doing, what Netanyahu's doing. Netanyahu is very pragmatic in politics. There's been reports that he didn't agree to this deal. I don't think that's true. I don't think Israel was actually blindsided. I think the move into Lebanon against Hezbollah, this massive attack, was planned in coordination with the ceasefire. I think that was intentional. I think they wanted to completely undermine the axis of resistance or force Iran into a situation that they could not come back from. And I think either were acceptable to Trump. If the axis of resistance fell and we got a Delcy Rodriguez out of it to run Iran, that was acceptable to Trump. If Iran backed up its axis, then we would go to total war and see a revolution, or see Iran so crippled beyond that the axis falls apart, and once again Trump gets what he wants, and we do what we have to do on military. He'd rather do it the first way because it means we don't incur as much cost and we get everything out of it, and Iran isn't as destroyed but he's willing to go in militarily. We've already seen that. Where we are now at this exact moment is exactly where we were when this whole thing started. Iran does not believe the U.S. has the resolve to do what it needs to do to win. And I think now we have the opposite problem. Iranian resolve is now in question, and Trump is forcing Iran to determine, does it truly have the resolve needed to incur the cost of war, or is it willing to instead give up on its axis and give up its deterrence in turn? Not that it really has deterrence anymore, but that's kind of where we're at. And the movement of U.S. assets, I think, further backs up that theory. Seeing if there's anything else coming in live to discuss. Oh, we might be getting Mark on. Let's see. Let's see if he joins. Just messaged me. We'll see if he gets on Discord. Is anyone even watching this stream? No. Just giving away a free advertisement, apparently. Hello, Mark. We are live right now. I'm just going to turn on my computer's audio so they can hear you. Okay. Let me just see if that's set up. Oh, and you are on screen, so that's good. I need to move this down. Okay, so I was just talking about the how Iran's in a bit of a spot right now.
You know what's annoying to me?
What?
How people are thinking that the 10-point plan was Iran's 10-point plan for the ceasefire.
Yeah, wait, hold on. I just want to see if your audio is coming through.
And it's just not.
Okay, so I was just talking about the how Iran's in a bit of a spot right now.
You know what's annoying to me?
Okay, good. Your audio is good. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. No one's here. No one's watching at the moment. We have one concurrent viewer. No one's in the chat. Sad. Very sad. Very sad. Okay, so yeah, go on about the 10-point ceasefire agreement.
So there's a lot of people that are misconstruing. Maybe I'm misconstruing this, but there's a lot of people that are saying that the 10-point ceasefire that was agreed on was Iran's initial 10-point ceasefire. And that's not the case. Am I correct in this? Maybe I'm wrong.
You are.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, one of their points, and we talked about this last night when we were seeing the Mario movie, was that, and I quote, the UNSC will remove some resolutions, which, again, the United States cannot do that. The United States cannot force the UNSC to pass something. What if the UK goes, you know, it'd be really funny, and then vetoes it? Does that mean war starts again?
Yeah, we were also talking about how one of Iran's points for the 10-point cease plan they offered, it basically just lifted all sanctions for Iran.
And created a choke point in the Strait of Hormuz.
In reality, the United States is not going to do that. And that's just in negotiating. And it's simply because, and it's simply a deal breaker because you're going to have both losing scenarios of the Iran nuclear deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least with the nuclear deal, you had either one, all sanctions imposed on Iran by not having the nuclear deal, or Iran stops making nuclear weapons with the other while having the nuclear deal. But if their 10-point ceasefire goes through, Iran gets their sanctions lifted, meaning that they get to massively fund state-sponsored terrorism and terrorize the United States and the rest of the Middle East. And also, they get to... Oh, I thought I saw you disconnect for a second. Oh, there it is. Nice.
I was putting up the 10-point peace plan. I'm going to put it on the stream as well.
And it also doesn't... Iran doesn't get to reject... Or Iran does get to reject the nuclear plan or the nuclear development. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think that was the right list.
Losing sides.
Yeah, and another thing I was talking about is I don't know if you heard that Israel basically did another pager attack against Hezbollah. They were staging a coup. They were intending to stage a coup against the Lebanese government, and instead what happened was that Israel blew up all the positions they had taken to do the coup, because you have to get in position. All the militant groups that were in 10 minutes they blew up over 100 targets, to give you an idea, and it was incredibly devastating. and it basically neutered Hezbollah even more. So Iran's now in a bad situation because Iran can either A, back up their ally and their proxy group, right? Or B, do nothing and keep their word because they're claiming the ceasefire included Hezbollah. Trump said it didn't, and I don't know why they thought it would. They would never agree to that. And as a
Oh,
result, um, so if Iran does nothing, right? If the new Iranian government does not want to be overthrown in the revolution and instead wants to be the new Delcy Rodriguez, because Trump says there's been a quote unquote regime change. And if they're in the same position as Delcy Rodriguez, if Delcy Rodriguez declared war on the United States and started sending drones or something, she would have been removed and a full-on new government would have been put in place. But instead, she towed the line and was able to get a deal with Trump. So if that's the situation in Iran, they're going to lose their proxy network. They're going to lose total credibility with their proxies. The proxies existed to create deterrence for Iran, and in exchange, they got support. So now they're getting attacked, and Iran isn't there to help them. It was like a NATO situation: an attack on one, an attack on all. When Gaza was invaded by Israel, the Houthis, Hezbollah, the Iraqi groups, they all started firing at Israel to some extent. Not very successfully most of the time, but still they did something. And what has that got? And now here we are in the opposite situation where Iran is being asked to back up their ally, the whole attack on one is attack on all thing, but that would mean violating the ceasefire. What they've done instead is that they've shut down the Strait of Hormuz again, which, Trump's statement, and I have it up here, said that, there had to be a full, safe and immediate passage to the Strait of Hormuz, and and they are not allowing that. They told ships to turn around. That violates the ceasefire. And per Trump's original statement, since 8 p.m. last night, Trump can do this so-called civilization ending, which really just means fully removing the government, going beyond what he did to Venezuela, because this is a much larger scale version of what we did in Venezuela at this moment. He will go beyond that, and that's why there's reports tonight out of the Wall Street Journal that this next phase, if the ceasefire collapses, will be far more intense than we've seen. And I think that's because Trump will go all out in removing the Iranian regime, the Islamic regime, and that's interesting. No oil or gas tankers have transited the Strait of Hormuz since the ceasefire. And that's where we're at. So Iran's either going to lose the proxies, which was one of Trump's three major lines. It was A, no nukes, B, no ballistics, and C, no proxies. The proxies are being attacked. It's already through military force. We've removed the ballistics and the nukes. Through military force, we're going to remove their proxies, and they can either go down with them or they can let them go. And I think that's where we're at the moment. And I think Iran is trying to do this game, which is what Hamas does, where they agree to something and then they start backtracking, but then they don't want the other side to backtrack. So, Iran does not want to fully commit to protecting Hezbollah, but they want to also shut down the Strait of Hormuz and go, we're only doing this because something else happened. You can't actually attack us, which is not how it works. Trump will not accept that game. If it's dead, and he will begin bombing. If it's not dead, then Iran better open it up and let Hezbollah go, or we're bombing.
yeah, and it's kind of like really fragile, this ceasefire, because there's a lot of things that are happening in play. The situation is very tense right now, and it's something I think it's what's being reported publicly is very different from what's being reported privately.
Mm-hmm.
Iran said in their state media, that Israel violated the ceasefire by, overturning or staging a coup against the Lebanese government.
No, Hezbollah was doing the
And
coup, and they blocked it by attacking Hezbollah.
right, yeah, yeah. But basically, Iran says to their public that Israel violated the ceasefire and that the Strait of Hormuz is going to remain closed. However, they've also reportedly privately told President Trump that the Strait of Hormuz is opening again. So it's really unsure. There's a lot of differing statements, especially on Iran's end. And really, even, after, let's say, 24 hours after the ceasefire was agreed on, it's really a lot of people are still really unsure. I'm pretty sure that some people on the inside are still unsure of what's happening and what's going to happen, especially in the near future.
I agree. I think the main issue now is credibility. I think it's very fragile, but I think it was designed that way. I think it was designed so that Iran, any action Iran tried to take, would be a trigger, and that Trump, in his wording, can pretty much do anything, can pretty much take anything Iran does, the Islamic regime does, and use that as a trigger. I mean, they could sneeze in the wrong direction, and Trump could say, "All right, you violated it. Back to war we go." And because he was very, very precise in what he was saying. And the fact that Iran's disputing the terms and trying to claim Lebanon was part of it is their way of kind of trying to regain credibility and deterrence. They want to. The fact that Israel and the U.S. both said that was not part of the deal. Israel's going to continue its mission in Lebanon. They're calling it Operation. I think it was Eternal Darkness, is what they're calling it in Lebanon now. It's it has its own name. It's become its own thing because and as a result, Hezbollah just got no, that was this morning. And as a result, Iran's either gonna have to put up or shut up with the Axis. And
let me ask you this.
Mhm.
Let me ask you this. What do you think about Trump's civilization? A whole civilization will end, or a whole civilization will die tonight tweet. And do you think it was, kind of a vital thing to publicly post to help the ceasefire?
So I do, but not for the reason people think. So I think when people saw that tweet, right, they saw civilization and thought Iran as a whole, like the Iranian people, Iranian civilization, which dates back to Cyrus the Great. That's not what he said. Trump, in my opinion, views Iranian civilization, as in the current version of it, to mean like the Islamic civilization that's currently been there since 1978. So like in the context of the past, Trump would say we will destroy an entire civilization, as in the Soviet Union, not Russia, if that makes sense. Like Russian civilization did not end when the Soviet Union fell. A communist civilization fell. So I think the same thing with regime. He uses these words not necessarily the way people will understand it, but the way he uses it. Like he said, there has been a regime change, which is what happened in Venezuela. A new government is in place. That doesn't mean it's a different civilization. Like Venezuela is still under the same party and relatively speaking, people and ideology, but it's now run by someone else, and it's being run different than it was before. And I think what Trump is saying right now is we've done regime change. The Ayatollah is gone. We don't know who's running the show there, but we do know that it's different, according to Trump. But if they don't do that, we will go further. We will go further than we went in Venezuela. I mean, imagine a world where Delcy Rodriguez doesn't back down and starts firing, missiles at America. We would level the place, and not the people, but like the government. Like we would fully remove the institutions of the communist government there. And that's why Trump, in the same tweet, threatens revolution. He's threatening to topple the full apparatus of the Islamist society that is there. The government, I guess you could say, like Trump views government different in phrasing. I don't know what the right phrase would be, but like fully removing the power. Because he even says perhaps revolution, and then that same day, Shah Reza Pahlavi puts out a statement hinting at revolution and saying like, there may be, the time is approaching. So I think the government there, based on that, was not scared of getting bombed. They were scared at the credible threat of a revolution that, succeed or fail, would be so damaging to their regime or to themselves that they would fall apart beyond what Trump has done. And if you look at what was going on before that tweet was sent out and during the day yesterday, they were bombing railroads, they were bombing roads, the infrastructure they were hitting, all of it was ultimately that if there was a revolution in Tehran, it was cutting Tehran off from the greater forces of the IRGC. So they couldn't send in suppression forces. The Basij have been getting blown up in their checkpoints every day by Israeli drones. They've brought in foreign mercenaries from Iraq. Shia groups who are usually in Iraq have come back into Iran after the last suppression, because Iran does not have enough forces to do it themselves and to suppress the people. And if they can't get to Tehran, if they can't get to the government to protect the institutions, no amount of foreign mercenaries will help you when they can't get there. So I think Trump, in doing the railroad strikes and in threatening infrastructure, was really saying, I can topple your regime from the air and spark a revolution that, whether or not it succeeds, will be the end of you, one way or another. If you do not want that, if you want to be Delcy Rodriguez, you better sign this deal for a 2-week ceasefire, which was Trump's position last week, or you will, or things will go very badly for you, and the civilization of the Islamic regime will end, and we will bring in a new civilization, maybe return to the one that was there before 1978 under the Shah, maybe a pure liberal government that's not connected to the Shah. I don't know. But, I think that's how Trump views it. I think he viewed Iranian civilization before 1978 and after. Just like China, was for thousands of years changed when the CCP took power. They're very different. And I think that's how he views it. I think he views them as two different civilizations, and that's what he meant. I don't think he literally meant he was going to nuke Iran. And people who said that were stupid.
I get that. I get that. I
The
honestly agree
phrasing
with
was
there was
bad.
a massive overreaction, but I think at the same time, this is just one of the many cases where Trump says something really stupid or Trump says something that he thinks is okay, but other people will perceive it the other way. And it's just one of the biggest reasons, in my opinion, it's the biggest reason why Trump is so unpopular. I mean, there's a lot of people that agree with his policies and what he's doing, especially on the foreign level. But the problem is the way he's messaging it out, it's not, it's not, the people aren't resonating with the messaging or they're getting confused about the messaging. And I think that's a big reason why he's really unpopular right now.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Something Trump didn't do going into the war that I found interesting is he didn't bother justifying it. Going into the Gulf War, George H.W. Bush many, many times went out and said, here's why we're doing this. Here's the situation. Here's why we must act. We are protecting a country from an invasion by its neighbor. We are restoring the Kuwaiti government from an aggressive regime, which, and all these things. George W. Bush went on an even bigger, PR campaign going into the Iraq War. He did the exact same thing. He went to the UN Council even and tried to convince them to authorize it and join in, and on an international scale. What Trump did here is he probably spoke to the leaders in the back rooms of 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 the UN or wherever. But other than that, he didn't go to the American people and say, "Here's why we're going to do it." And I think because honestly, there was no point. The American people would not care what he said. Either one, because they will support him no matter what. So those people don't need to be convinced. Two, they will never support him no matter what he does. So it's useless talking to them. Or three, the people who could be swayed will only care about the results, not the justification. So if this goes really well and Trump wins and manages to succeed, people will go back and say, okay, yeah, this was a good idea. But wasting energy and time before that won't matter because people will care about the outcome. They're not going to say, well, it was a good idea at the time. Look at Iraq. Trump, I think, truly resents what went on in Iraq. I think he looks at it and it was a failure, and he made that very clear in the 2016 election. And no amount of convincing will matter if you get in Iraq. He doesn't want to convince people now. He wants to show people what it means to succeed. Trump didn't justify the Midnight Hammer. He did it. And even though people challenged it, there was no, it happened. Venezuela, same thing. He didn't bother truly going around touring America, talking to people about why this has to happen. He just did it, and it worked. And Democrats and Republicans had to admit, okay, that was a good idea. It worked. Approval for that operation was positive. This is not over yet. When it's over, if Iran, the Islamic regime falls, when gas prices come down, when we see more revolutions against Hezbollah and the Houthis, and these Iraqi groups begin to struggle, there will be approval. And if it fails, that he hasn't lost anything because people will turn against him anyway if it fails. Those people who could be swayed. He'd rather sway them with results than with justification going in. And I think that's why he didn't bother. It was a waste of energy, especially after Iraq, where, all this effort was put in just to be proven wrong. There was no point. And that's why he was very vague about the goals going in.
I get that. I get that completely. It just makes people really panicked and confused, and I think from a utilitarianist perspective, it's, the ends can justify the means. They can. It depends on the results, but it makes a lot of people panic, and it's scary for Republicans as a whole because right now they're seeming like they're gonna get killed in the
Well,
midterms,
yeah,
and
Wisconsin
then in
last night was pretty
2028,
rough.
the what?
Wisconsin race. Democrats. They
Yeah,
got
a lot of
Democrats
races are really
destroyed
rough. Oh,
the
Democrat got
Republicans.
destroyed in Wisconsin.
No, they destroyed Republicans.
Yeah. Okay.
It was like a bloodbath. But
I mean,
but no,
but
I
yeah, I
mean,
mean,
I I I think Trump has already priced in losing the midterms. The Senate will not flip, and even if it does, if the House is going to flip. The House was always going to flip. The moment the
yeah.
redistricting wars occurred, the House was lost. If it wasn't lost already, it was probably lost the moment Trump got elected. It was inevitable. It was too tight a majority to protect, and the redistricting failed to achieve anything to redefend it. No matter what Trump does, no matter how big a majority Democrats get or don't get, it doesn't matter. The House is gone. The Senate is not going to. It would have to be really bad for the Senate to flip. So at that point, when you consider those things, the political costs of the war are almost irrelevant because the cost and the outcome, the cost might be higher, but the outcome politically is the same. It'll hurt Republicans down ballot maybe, but not, but not Trump. And Trump's done after this anyway. His goal, I think, is foreign policy based. I think domestically, the big beautiful bill was the main push. I think we'll see one more big push this year, using reconciliation. But after that, I think that's his legislative agenda. I think after the midterms, he doesn't have any intention of doing anything legislatively big. And I could be wrong, but I think those are going to be the two big pushes. And he's going to get whatever he can out of this year's session. And what after that, that's not he's not he learned from 2018. He has to re-strategize. So he's doing things. He's burning through as big of a loss as he can take in the midterm and doing everything before that, so that after the midterms they can focus on 2028. So he's written off 26, and he's going to, basically bankrupt that election. But by doing that, 2028 is no longer as toxic for the Republicans for any unpopular outcomes that Trump may incur, because it's all going to be all those benefits to the Democrats by Trump doing things that are unpopular are going to be burned on elections they were already going to win. Even if they win more of them than they were going to win, the actual outcome is the same.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay.
I feel like somebody is still going to be a sacrificial lamb in 2028 just because we're going to have, 12 years of Trump. I get that Trump was not president for 4 of them, but
Mm-hmm.
even in those middle 4 years, Trump was still very relevant in politics, and I think a lot of people are fatigued as well. So I think somebody's going to be, whoever becomes the nominee in 2028, whether it's JD Vance, whether it's somebody outside the Trump administration, I think they're honestly going to be the sacrificial lamb
Mm-hmm.
to the Democrat that's inevitably going to win. I get the strategy, and I agree with it. 2026 is lost in the House. They're definitely not going to pick up the Senate because that's just too big of a challenge, and you already are seeing Republicans spend millions upon millions of dollars in places like Ohio. I think the GOP spent $79 million so far in Ohio. In North Carolina, $71 million.
Mm-hmm.
They've spent 17 million in a state like New Hampshire. So I think their big strategy is defense. I see their Senate strategy. They're gonna hold the
Mm-hmm.
Senate for sure because I don't see them flipping Ohio or Texas or any other like
North
Nebraska. I
Carolina.
don't see it. Uh,
I don't
I mean,
either. I'm
I
saying
agree. In the House,
it's
it's
DOA.
definitely very contentious, and it's gonna flip. And I feel like I've said this, right after 2024, people were very panicked about Republicans having control over both houses of the legislature, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, the presidency, and the Supreme Court. And I said, look, this is just like what we saw in 2008. Democrats are going to get a lot of stuff done in 2 years, and then there's going to be like the House
Mm-hmm.
that gets flipped. And the pendulum's going to swing the other way. And right now, we're seeing the pendulum swing the other way.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of breaking news. So Iran has announced, the Islamic regime has announced that why aren't these working? The little, all right, I don't know what that's about. The little like things that show up when we're talking, they're all not working. I'll get rid of them for now then. So Iran has announced that they've created a safe corridor that you have to go all the way around Iraq Island, which is this little island, to get really close to Iranian territory, and then go around. That way, if you go through there, they can shoot at you if you're not authorized and extort you. If you go through the traditional route, they might shoot at you, or it might be mined. So you better not go through there because maybe we mined it.
Hmm.
And that's their way of saying it's now open and accessible, and I don't know if Trump will go for that. I don't know if that's enough of an out.
Well, there's already drone surveillance and satellite surveillance all over that strait.
Hmm.
So we're just gonna have to see. I mean, very
Yeah.
fragile ceasefire. And of course, if Iran's gonna try anything, Donald Trump and the United States are going to absolutely eviscerate Iran
Hmm.
like they have never seen before.
Hmm. Right,
But we're gonna have to see.
but I'm saying I think this new path. I don't know if that's their way of getting an out for violating the ceasefire. I don't know if they're going to show this to Trump and say, does this count as opening and allowing safe passage? We've created a special safe route just for for everyone. Trump says you can't charge tolls. That was a new report that just came out a little bit ago. I don't know if they're going to or not, but we will see. I think one other thing before we wrap up. Let me see if there's anything else. I saw something I thought. Let's see. Oh, Lebanon. There's a new Lebanon separatist movement in the south. Did you hear about that?
I did not hear about this. Wow.
So a group of Christians have declared they want independence for southern Lebanon and that they no longer want to be part of the failed state in the north in Beirut. They've declared it a failed state and a puppet of Hezbollah. They've been unable to disarm Hezbollah. They're too weak. They want out, which is
What a,
would be very interesting.
it would be very interesting. What a rare Christian W. What type of Christians are they?
They're Maronites.
Maronites? Okay. All
So
right.
which is what Israel tried to do in the 80s. In 1982, they invaded and they established something called the Southern Lebanon Army and recognized South Lebanon, which was just which was like a fake government. I mean, if we're being honest, I think they're going to try for it again. I think this time there's much more will and capability to make it happen, and it falls into the greater strategy that the UAE and Israel are playing to find viable states within states, like Somaliland, for example, or South Yemen, or maybe what's going on in Sudan. Cut them off of the parts that are failures or troublesome and back them as back them. They've built this kind of like axis, starting the Mediterranean through their allyship with Greece, Cyprus. If there's South Lebanon, Israel, then Egypt's kind of neutral. They just want tolls. Then you go down the Red Sea, the Somaliland, who's there to protect the Red Sea, and they've actually invited the IDF to build its first ever foreign base that isn't just like where they're fighting a war, like an actual base. Then you go out and you have southern Yemen on the other side, flanking the Red Sea. Then you keep going and you have the UAE going into the Strait of Hormuz, and maybe even a pro, if Iran falls, maybe a pro Western Iran or a neutral Iran, and Saudi Arabia therefore would be completely encircled, which is something people have talked about but haven't talked about enough, in my opinion. The complete encirclement of Saudi Arabia, which in turn encircles Turkey through Greece and their whole conflict, and Cyprus, Western North Cyprus, and Qatar, and it may go against their goal, which is to create unified states that are Sunni majority led, and they want to run Lebanon and Syria. They want to run Yemen, which is what the legitimate government of Yemen is, a Saudi Arabia backed government, as is Qatar, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia are all backing the official Lebanese and Syrian governments. I think they want to do the Lebanon what they did to Syria, kick out the Iranian IRGC Hezbollah groups and place a Sunni pro Saudi Turkey government in there. And I think Israel is going to try to carve out, and the UAE are going to try to carve out sections of the countries that will fall under this umbrella to create their own rival axis, so to say. There's going to be two new axes. The good news is for us Americans, this is great because both of these axes, also Pakistan and India, would be on their respective sides. Pakistan's a Saudi Arabia ally. India is an ally of the Israelis. But all these countries are U.S. allies. So the U.S. is going to have complete dominance of the Middle East, regardless of which of the two groups, are trying to win the favor of the U.S. or being rivals of the day. In both cases, the U.S. benefits because everyone is an ally of the U.S., so no one's going to go too far and start creating whole wars. I think it'll shift to a more political economic warfare, where if this works, and I think that's Trump's ultimate play. It doesn't matter if Saudi Arabia recognizes Israel anymore. Israel circumvented that need through the UAE and their new because originally the goal of the UAE and Saudi Arabia was to kind of work together to quote unquote, rule the Middle East together, and they were working together on a lot of these projects, like in Yemen and elsewhere. But then they went their separate ways, and now the UAE is pursuing its original plan, and it's doing it with Israel this time. So I think we'll see what happens there, and I think that's pretty much it. Any other thoughts from you, Mark?
No, not really.
Anything in
Just,
New Jersey we should know about?
is there anything in New Jersey we should know about? I mean, uh, not really. I mean, just it's in that in-between period between the reorg and the budget. So there's going to be a lot more activity in May and in June, especially in June, because they're going to have to get the budget out by then. Seeing Governor Sherrill's budget proposal was really interesting. The budget is $60.7 billion. And that's without Christmas tree items. It would be the largest budget in state history. Meanwhile, no new taxes for individuals will be there. It's also $700 million cut in pork spending.
Hmm.
So, I mean, there's a lot of people that don't like this budget. I'm hearing that leadership in the state legislature, like the majority leadership in the state legislature, does not like this proposed budget. So they're going to have to negotiate this budget very much. But we're just going to have to see. And we're just going to have to see what happens and how this develops. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of a slow month, April, for at least state politics, because it's
Right.
not like there's no voting sessions this month. That's going to be in May.
Hmm.
There's not really going to be any committees. I
Here,
mean, there's budget
real quick,
committees.
before we finish off for good, I think this is funny. So you remember how we've been talking about how there's been a lot of death by could have been an email?
A what?
The death by could have been an email. They all get together to talk and they get blown up.
Yes, yes.
So Hezbollah is claiming that Israel targeted all these officials today in over the 100 plus 10-minute strikes because they were using Zoom and got hacked and got doxxed essentially instead of meeting in person.
Maybe just don't talk to each other at all. Then I don't know
Yeah,
what to tell you.
at this point, I
Yeah,
don't know
at
what
this
to
point,
tell you.
it's that's a tough luck.
It really is. I mean, it's kind of a lose lose there. So, thank you all for watching. For anyone, we had some people in earlier, no one really in the chat ever, but yeah, it was a good stream. It was interesting stuff to talk about, and we will see you next time.